The crystal spear carved a shimmering arc through the battlefield, its razor edge humming with lethal energy as Kyra whirled to meet the encroaching raiders. One careless step from any of them would mean death. Her silver fur clung to her body, soaked with sweat and streaked with blood, some drawn from her own wounds, far more from the warriors already lying lifeless at her feet. For 3 centuries that spear had been the pride of her bloodline, passed from mother to daughter through generations of champions. It had never failed its bearer. But today, for the very first time, Kyra wondered if her family's greatest treasure would witness the end of its legacy instead of preserving it. The Dracor raiders tightened their circle, their cruel smiles growing wider with every passing heartbeat. They could smell exhaustion. They could see her slowing down, and they knew she was running out of time, their reptilian faces twisted with cruel smiles. There were 12 of them left, maybe 13. She had lost count after the first hour of fighting. They moved like hunting pack animals, testing her defenses, looking for any sign of weakness. Behind her, the old temple ruins provided shelter for the last survivors of her village. 37 villanini, mostly younglings and elders, huddled in the ancient stone chambers. They were counting on her to keep the raiders away. She could hear their frightened whispers echoing off the temple walls. The Dramor chieftain stepped forward. He was twice her size, covered in dark scales that looked like natural armor. His warhammer dripped with the blood of her fallen comrades. When he smiled, rows of sharp teeth gleamed in the afternoon sun. "Give up, little cat," he said in broken galactic standard. "Your people taste better when they are afraid." Cather adjusted her grip on the spear and shifted her stance. Her legs trembled with exhaustion, but she kept her voice steady. "My ancestors died fighting. I will do the same." The chieftain laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "Your ancestors were weak. That is why they are dead." 3 raiders rushed her at once from different directions. Keith moved like water spinning and striking. The crystal blade found its mark twice, dropping 2 of the attackers. The third managed to grab her spear shaft with his clawed hands. They struggled for control of the weapon. The Dracor was stronger, but Kithra was faster. She twisted and pulled, trying to break free. Other raiders moved closer, sensing their chance. The chieftain raised his massive warhammer and brought it down hard. The ancient crystal spear, which had survived 3 centuries of battles, finally met its match. The blade shattered into 1,000 pieces, sending shards of light dancing across the temple stones. Keitha stumbled backward, holding only the broken shaft. The raiders roared with triumph. They had her now. Cathra looked at the broken weapon in her hands, then at the circle of enemies closing in around her. She thought of her mother, who had carried this spear into battle against pirates. She thought of her grandmother, who had used it to defend their homeworld during the sector wars. They had all been brave. They had all died with honor. She would not shame their memory. The young warrior dropped the broken shaft and drew her ceremonial knife. It was a small weapon, barely longer than her hand, but it was sharp, and it was hers. The raiders laughed at the sight of it. "Brave little cat," the chieftain said. "You will make a good trophy." Cathar whispered a prayer to her ancestors in the old language. The words felt warm on her tongue, like a final gift from those who had gone before. She raised the knife and prepared to sell her life as dearly as possible. The first raider charged. That was when the sky exploded. Something came crashing through the forest canopy like a fallen star. Trees bent and broke under its weight. The ground shook beneath their feet. A wave of heat and smoke washed over the clearing, making everyone stumble and cough. When the dust settled, there was a crater where the old shrine had been. In the center of the crater sat a strange metal pod, still glowing hot from whatever journey had brought it here. Steam rose from its surface, and lights blinked along its sides. The raiders stared at the pod in confusion. They had never seen anything like it. Cathra had never seen anything like it either, but she was smart enough to recognize a gift when one fell from the sky. A hatch opened on the side of the pod with a sharp hiss. Something moved inside. The Dramor raised their weapons, uncertain but ready for a new threat. A figure emerged from the pod, standing up slowly and looking around the clearing. It was unlike any being Cathara had ever seen. It stood upright on 2 legs like a Vani, but it was taller and broader. Its skin was a strange pink-brown color, and it had almost no fur except for dark hair on top of its head. Most unusual of all, its face was flat and smooth, with small eyes that seemed to see everything at once. The creature wore some kind of armor covered in pockets and straps. It carried a weapon that looked nothing like any rifle or energy beam she knew. The weapon hummed with a sound that made her ears twitch. The strange being looked at the Dryo Raiders, then at Cathara with her tiny knife, then back at the Raiders. It seemed to be thinking something over. Finally it spoke. Its voice was deeper than but not as rough as a Dryo's. It spoke in perfect galactic standard. "Mind if I enter the fight?" The chieftain found his voice first. "What are you, alien? This is not your battle." The strange creature smiled, showing small white teeth that looked nothing like the fangs of either species present. "Actually, I make it a point to help people who are outnumbered 12 to 1, especially when they are protecting children." It raised its humming weapon and pointed it at the nearest raider. "The name is Marcus Chen, by the way. Sergeant Terran Colonial Marines, and you gentlemen just made my day a lot more interesting." The raider that the weapon pointed at laughed nervously. "Terran? What is Terran? We have never heard of such a species." Marcus Chen smiled wider. "Yeah, we get that a lot. We are pretty new around here." The chieftain snarled and stepped forward. "1 against 12, Terran. You cannot win." Marcus looked around the circle of raiders again, then at Cathara. She was still holding her knife, ready to fight despite the impossible odds. Something in her stance seemed to please him. "Ma'am," he said to her politely, "you might want to take cover behind those rocks over there. This is going to get a bit loud." Then he looked back at the chieftain, and his smile disappeared completely. When he spoke again, his voice was cold as winter space. 12 against 1. You know what? I like those odds just fine." The first raider charged, screaming a battle cry. Marcus Chen pulled the trigger on his strange weapon. The sound it made was like thunder and lightning having a fight. The charging raider simply disappeared in a flash of blue light, leaving nothing but a scorch mark on the ground where he had been. The other raiders stared at the empty space where their comrade had been standing. They looked at the strange human with his impossible weapon. They looked at each other. Marcus checked some kind of display on his weapon and nodded with satisfaction. 11 to 1 now. Better odds for you guys, right? The chieftain roared in rage and pointed at the human. "Kill him. Kill him now." But as the remaining raiders rushed forward, Cather saw something in the human's eyes that made her feel hope for the first time in hours. He was not afraid. He was not even worried. He looked like he was about to have fun. The next few minutes changed everything Cather thought she knew about warfare. Marcus Chen moved like nothing she had ever seen before. The Volani fought with grace and honor, following ancient forms passed down through generations. The Dracor relied on brute strength and overwhelming numbers, but this human fought like the very ground beneath their feet was his weapon. 3 raiders charged him from different directions. Instead of standing his ground like a proper warrior, Marcus rolled behind a fallen tree trunk. The raiders crashed into each other where he had been standing. Before they could untangle themselves, that terrible humming weapon spoke twice more. 2 more raiders became empty spaces filled with light and heat. "What manner of sorcery is this?" the chieftain bellowed. Marcus popped up from behind a different piece of cover entirely. Kithra had not even seen him move. "No magic," he called back cheerfully. "Just good old-fashioned human engineering. This little beauty fires metal slugs at about 3% of light speed. Physics does the rest." He fired again. Another raider vanished. The remaining Dracor began to spread out trying to surround him. But every time they thought they had him cornered, Marcus was somewhere else. He used the temple ruins like they were part of his own body, disappearing behind walls and emerging from unexpected angles. Kithra pressed herself against the stone wall and watched in fascination. The human never stayed in one place for more than a few seconds. He seemed to know where every piece of cover was, where every shadow fell, how to use the broken ground to his advantage. It was like watching a master hunter who had studied this battlefield for years instead of someone who had arrived here minutes ago. A raider tried to flank him by climbing onto the temple roof. Marcus looked up, smiled, and did something to his weapon. Instead of the focused beam that had disintegrated the others, it fired a burst of smaller projectiles. The raider fell from the roof with a thud and did not get up. Multiple firing modes, Marcus explained to no one in particular. Really useful feature. The chieftain was getting desperate. He gestured to his remaining warriors and shouted orders in the Drakor language. They stopped trying to surround the human and instead charged him all at once, hoping to overwhelm him with a direct assault. Marcus saw them coming and did something that made Kithra's ears flatten against her head in disbelief. He stood up in plain sight and walked toward them. The raiders roared with triumph, thinking they finally had him, but as they closed the distance, Marcus threw something small and round at the ground between them. He covered his eyes with one arm and kept walking. The explosion was not large, but it was blindingly bright. The raiders stumbled around, clawing at their eyes and crying out in pain. Marcus walked through their confused ranks like he was strolling through a garden, his weapon speaking quietly 4 more times. When the light faded and the smoke cleared, only the chieftain remained. The big Drakor stood alone among the bodies of his warriors, his warhammer clutched in shaking hands. His yellow eyes darted around the clearing, looking for threats that might come from any direction. Marcus reloaded his weapon with practiced movements. "Just you and me now, big guy. Want to surrender? I promise you will be treated according to the Galactic Conventions on prisoners of war." The chieftain spat on the ground. Do not surrender to inferior species." Inferior? Marcus looked genuinely curious. "What makes you think we are inferior? You have no claws, no fangs, no natural armor," the chieftain said. "Your technology is primitive, your species is unknown, you are weak." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "You know, people keep telling us that. You are probably the 15th species to call humans weak this year." He smiled that cold smile again. "Funny thing about being weak, though. It makes you really good at finding creative solutions to problems." The chieftain charged with a roar that shook the temple walls. Marcus waited until the last possible second, then stepped aside like a dancer. The chieftain's massive warhammer smashed into the stone where the human had been standing, sending chips of rock flying everywhere. Before the Drakor could recover his balance, Marcus grabbed something from his belt. It looked like a small metal tube. He pressed it against the chieftain's neck and squeezed. Electricity arced through the air. The chieftain convulsed once and collapsed like a felled tree. Marcus stood over the unconscious raider, breathing hard but unheard. He checked his weapon again, then looked around the clearing to make sure there were no more threats. That was when Kithra realized she was still holding her knife. She looked down at the tiny blade, then at the human who had just defeated 12 armed raiders without taking a single wound. The knife felt foolish in her hands now. Marcus noticed her staring and misunderstood her expression. "Hey, that was some serious courage you showed there," he said. "Going up against 12 of these guys with just a knife. That takes guts." Kithra lowered the weapon. "I was going to die." "Maybe," Marcus admitted. "But you were going to die fighting. That counts for something." He gestured toward the temple ruins. "Are there people in there who need help?" She nodded. 37 survivors, mostly young ones and elders, injured, some. "We have been hiding here for 2 days since they attacked our village." Marcus shouldered his weapon and pulled out a small device that flickered with lights. "This is Chen to Wanderer." "Come in, Wanderer." A voice crackled from the device, speaking in the same strange accent as Marcus. "Chen, this is Wanderer. We have been tracking your descent. Are you intact?" "Intact and operational, Captain. I have 37 refugees here who need medical attention and evacuation. Requesting immediate pickup. Copy that. We are inbound to your location. ETA 15 minutes. Marcus put the device away and looked at Kithra. "My ship is coming. We can get your people to safety." "Why?" she asked. The question came out sharper than she intended. "Why would you help us?" "You do not know us. We are not your people." Marcus tilted his head like he was considering the question. "Where I come from, we have a saying, evil wins when good people do nothing." He gestured at the bodies of the raiders scattered around the clearing. These guys were definitely evil. "You were definitely good people." The math was pretty simple. Kithra stared at him. In all her years as a warrior, she had never heard anyone describe a battle in terms of good and evil. Honor and dishonor, yes. Victory and defeat, certainly. But good and evil? What kind of species are you?" she asked. Marcus laughed, and for the first time since he had emerged from his pod, he sounded young. "Honestly, we are still trying to figure that out ourselves. We have only been traveling between stars for about 70 years. Most of the galaxy thinks we are barbarians. Are you?" He considered this seriously. "Depends on who you ask, I guess. We fight when we have to. We protect people who cannot protect themselves. We do not give up even when the odds are bad." He smiled. "Some folks find that barbaric." A sound like distant thunder rumbled overhead. Kithra looked up to see a sleek ship descending through the clouds. It was smaller than the massive Drayor warship she had seen, but it moved with a grace that spoke of advanced technology. "That is us," Marcus said. He picked up the unconscious chieftain and slung him over his shoulder like a sack of grain. "We will need to take this one for questioning. Intelligence says the Drachor have been getting more aggressive lately. Command wants to know why." As the ship settled in the clearing with barely a whisper of sound, Kithra felt something she had not experienced in days. Hope. But she also felt curiosity. This human and his people were clearly more than they appeared to be. The question was, what did they want in return for their help? She was about to find out. The human ship was nothing like what Kithra had expected. From the outside, it looked sleek and military, all smooth lines and gleaming metal. But once Marcus led her and the other survivors aboard, she found herself in a space that felt more like a home than a warship. The corridors were wide and well lit with soft carpeting underfoot. The walls displayed images of blue skies and green forests that seemed to move gently in an unfelt breeze. "Medical bay is this way," Marcus said, leading a group of injured Vani down a corridor lined with pictures of strange animals. "Doc Williams will take good care of you." The medical bay itself was spotlessly clean and filled with equipment Cather did not recognize. A human female in a white coat looked up as they entered. She was shorter than Marcus, with graying hair pulled back in a practical style, but her hands moved with the sure confidence of someone who had been healing people for many years. "What do we have, Sergeant?" she asked, already moving toward the most seriously injured survivor. 12 Draymore raiders hit their village. Marcus replied, "These folks have been hiding in ruins for 2 days. Dehydration, some cuts and bruises, couple of broken bones. Nothing too serious, but they have been through hell." The doctor was already examining an elderly male whose arm hung at an odd angle. "I see. Well, we will have them fixed up in no time." She looked at Cathara. "Are you injured, dear?" Cather shook her head. The doctor's manner was gentle, but professional, reminding her of the healers back home. It was hard to believe this woman belonged to the same species as the deadly warrior who had just saved them all. "Good, Sergeant Chen. The captain wants to see you on the bridge when you are finished here." Marcus nodded and turned to Keith. "Want to come along? Might be interesting." She followed him through more corridors, past rooms filled with humans working at tasks she could not identify. They all looked up as Marcus passed, greeting him with smiles and jokes. Some stared at her with open curiosity, but their stares felt friendly rather than hostile. "How many of you are on this ship?" she asked. 43 crew, Marcus said, "plus you folks now. We are what humans call a scout ship. Our job is to explore new areas and make contact with other species." "Is that what you were doing when you found us?" "More or less. We were mapping this system when our sensors picked up the energy signatures from the Dramor ships." Captain decided to investigate. The bridge was smaller than she had expected, with only a handful of humans working at various control stations. The walls here showed images of the space around them, stars and planets hanging in the black void like scattered jewels. A woman turned to greet them as they entered. She was older than Marcus, with short gray hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of years spent making difficult decisions. She wore the same type of uniform as the others, but the way the crew looked at her made it clear she was in command. "Sergeant Chen," she said, "good work down there. Casualty report. No friendly casualties, Captain Rodriguez. All refugees are aboard and receiving medical attention. 1 prisoner secured and holding." "Excellent." The captain turned to Cathara and extended her hand in what Cathara recognized as a human greeting gesture. I am Captain Elena Rodriguez, commanding officer of the UES Wanderer. You must be the warrior Sergeant Chen told me about. Kithara of the 3rd Clanny Defense Force. A pleasure to meet you, Kithara. I understand your village was attacked by Draore raiders 2 days ago. They came without warning and killed many of my people. We managed to escape to the old temple, but she gestured helplessly. There were too many of them. Captain Rodriguez nodded grimly. How many ships did they have? 3 small attack vessels, maybe 40 raiders total. The captain exchanged glances with Marcus. That is a much larger force than usual for Draore raids in this sector. They typically operate in groups of 5 or 6. A young human at one of the control stations looked up from his work. Captain, I am picking up Dramor communication traffic about 60 light minutes out. Sounds like fleet movements. Captain Rodriguez moved to look at his display. Show me. The main screen changed to show a tactical map of the surrounding star systems. Red dots appeared in several locations, each one marking a draw ship or fleet. There were far more dots than Kithra had expected. Jesus, someone whispered. Marcus stepped closer to the display. Captain, that looks like a full invasion force. Agreed. Communications try to raise the Galactic Council. Priority 1 message. Kithra stared at the red dots on the screen. There are so many of them. What do they want? Captain Rodriguez turned to her. What can you tell us about Draore expansion patterns? Have they been moving into this sector gradually, or is this a sudden change? They have been raiding border worlds for the past year, Kithara said. Small attacks mostly. Nothing like this. The Council said they were just testing our defenses. The Council was wrong, Marcus said flatly. This is not a test. This is the real thing. A communication officer looked up from her station. Captain, I have the Galactic Council on subspace. They are refusing our priority request. Say they will review our report in the next standard meeting cycle. When is that? 3 weeks from now. The bridge fell silent. Cather felt a chill run down her spine. 3 weeks. But they will reach the homeworld in 5 days. Captain Rodriguez rubbed her forehead like she was fighting a headache. What about your own military? Can they mount a defense? Kithra thought of the fleet. Sleek ships built for patrol duty and ceremonial flights. We have 37 ships. Good ships. But she looked at the tactical display again. Not enough. What about evacuation? The Council has ordered us to prepare for an honorable last stand. They say retreat would dishonor our ancestors. Marcus made a sound like a growl. Honor does not stop railgun rounds. Captain Rodriguez was studying the tactical display with the intensity of a predator sizing up prey. How long until they reach inhabited systems? First colonies will be hit in 48 hours, the navigation officer reported. Viney homeworld in 5 days, like she said, and the nearest Council fleet 2 weeks out minimum. The captain was quiet for a long moment thinking. Finally, she turned to her communications officer. Send a message to Colonial Command. Full tactical report. Highest priority. Tell them we are requesting immediate deployment of Task Force 7 under Protocol Omega. The communications officer looked surprised. Ma'am, Protocol Omega requires authorization from... I know what it requires. Lieutenant, send the message. Marcus straightened up. Captain, are you sure? Protocol Omega is pretty extreme. 40,000 Dramor raiders heading for defenseless colonies, Sergeant. I think extreme is exactly what we need. Keitha looked between them. What is Protocol Omega? Captain Rodriguez smiled, and for a moment, she looked remarkably like Marcus had when he was facing the Draore raiders. Something we learned from our own history, Kithara. Sometimes the best defense is making the enemy regret they ever found you. The communications officer looked up. Message sent, Captain. Colonial Command is requesting confirmation of threat assessment. Send them everything. Full sensor logs. Prisoner interrogation reports when we have them, the works. Make sure they understand what we are dealing with here. She turned back to Kithra. In the meantime, we need to learn everything we can about Draore tactics and technology. You have fought them before. Would you be willing to help us? Kathra thought of her village, of her broken spear, of 37 people who were alive now because a human had decided to help strangers. Yes, I will help you however I can. Good. Because if this works, you are about to see what humans do when someone threatens innocent people. Looking at the determination in the captain's eyes, Kithra found herself believing that maybe, just maybe, the Drakor had made a very serious mistake. The Dramor chieftain was larger than he had seemed on the battlefield. Kith realized as she watched Marcus prepare for the interrogation. In the holding cell, under bright lights and without his warhammer, he still looked dangerous. His yellow eyes tracked every movement with predatory intelligence. "His name is Gorthak the Render," she told Marcus as they stood outside the cell. "I heard his warriors use that title. Among the Drakor, such names must be earned through acts of great violence." Marcus nodded, checking the translation device he wore on his collar. "What can you tell me about their command structure?" "They follow strength above all else. The strongest leads. The weak serve or die, but they are not stupid. Cunning is valued as much as raw power." "Good to know." Marcus activated the holding cell's communication system. "Gorthk, I am Sergeant Chen. I have some questions for you." The chieftain looked up with a sneer. "I will tell you nothing, softkin. Actually, you already have told us plenty," Marcus said calmly. "Your ship's communication logs were very informative. We know about the fleet movements, the invasion timeline, the target list." Gorthak's expression shifted slightly. "Impossible. Our encryption codes are about 50 years behind human standards," Marcus finished. "We cracked them in 20 minutes. Kithra watched the chieftain's face carefully. She had interrogated prisoners before, and she knew the signs. Gorthak was trying to hide his surprise, but Marcus had clearly hit a nerve. Marcus continued in the same conversational tone. "What I do not understand is the timing. Why now? The Drakor have been content with small raids for decades. What changed?" "You will learn soon enough," Gorik said. "When the Great Fleet arrives, all the soft peoples will kneel or burn." The Great Fleet. That would be the force gathering at the staging point in the Kairos system, right? About 40,000 ships. This time Gorth could not hide his shock. "How do you know about Kairos?" "Same way we knew about your communication codes. Human intelligence networks are pretty thorough." Marcus leaned against the wall, looking relaxed. "What I really want to know is who is giving the orders. This is not a traditional Dramor expansion. Someone planned this very carefully." Gorak remained silent, but Kithra could see the war going on behind his eyes. He wanted to boast about his people's strength, but he also knew he was giving away valuable information. Marcus tried a different approach. "You know, Gorthak, I have been studying your species, fascinating culture, very direct, very honest. When a Drakor wants something, he takes it. When he faces an enemy, he fights. No deception, no politics, just pure strength against strength." The chieftain straightened slightly, pleased by what he took as a compliment. "But this invasion plan," Marcus continued, "it has politics written all over it. Coordinated timing, strategic targets, careful resource allocation. That does not sound like traditional Dramor thinking to me." "You know nothing of our ways," Gorthak growled. But there was uncertainty in his voice now. "Maybe not, but I know what it looks like when someone else is pulling the strings." Marcus studied the prisoner carefully. "Who convinced your leaders to launch this invasion?" "Gorthak, because I do not think it was their idea." For a moment, the chieftain looked almost vulnerable. Then his expression hardened again. "The Empire grew strong. We take what we wish. That is the way of the Drakor." Marcus sighed and straightened up. "All right, have it your way." He turned toward the door, then paused. "Oh, one more thing. You might want to send a message to your fleet. Tell them to stay away from human space." Gorthak laughed harshly. "Your species is unknown to us. You have no space worth avoiding." "Actually, we have quite a bit of space. 73 colony worlds, 16 major trade routes, and about 300 research stations scattered across this part of the galaxy." Marcus smiled. "The thing is, most people do not know about us because we prefer to keep a low profile. But if your people threaten our neighbors," he let the sentence hang in the air. "You threaten us," Gorthak demanded. "You are one small ship with 40 humans aboard. We are 40,000 ships with millions of warriors." "Numbers do not always tell the whole story," Marcus said mildly. "Just ask the 12 raiders who attacked the temple." As they left the holding area, Cathara found herself deep in thought. "He was frightened at the end," she said. "You noticed that too?" Marcus looked pleased. "Good eye. Yeah, something about the human space comment really spooked him. But why? As he said, "You are only one ship." Marcus smiled. "Are we?" Before she could ask what he meant, Captain Rodriguez's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. "All hands to stations. We have incoming priority traffic from Colonial Command." The bridge was buzzing with activity when they arrived. Every station was occupied, and the main screen showed a complex tactical display that made Cathara's head spin. Captain Rodriguez looked up as they entered. "Sergeant, perfect timing. Colonial Command just authorized Protocol Omega. Task Force 7 is moving to intercept." "How many ships?" Marcus asked. "Officially, 12 vessels on patrol in this sector." Marcus raised an eyebrow. Officially, Captain Rodriguez's smile was predatory. Officially, the other 130 ships in the task force are conducting routine training exercises in nearby systems. Pure coincidence that they happen to be armed with the latest experimental weapons and staffed by our most experienced crews. Cathra stared at the tactical display as new symbols began appearing. Human ships, dozens of them, moving with purpose toward the Dramor fleet positions. 142 ships. "But I thought humans were a new species. How do you have so many vessels?" "We have been building ships longer than we have been traveling between stars," Captain Rodriguez explained. "When we finally developed faster-than-light travel, we had a lot of hulls ready to be converted." Marcus was studying the fleet movements on the screen. "What is the plan, Captain?" "Asymmetric warfare doctrine, full implementation. We hit their supply lines first, then their communication networks, then their command structure. By the time they figure out what is happening, they will be fighting blind and hungry." "What about the colonies they are heading for?" "Evacuation is already underway. Every civilian transport in the sector is converging on threatened worlds. We will have most of the population out before the Dramor arrive." Cathara felt a surge of hope, followed immediately by confusion, but the Galactic Council said evacuation was impossible. Too many people, not enough ships. Captain Rodriguez and Marcus exchanged looks. "The Council was thinking about using official Council transport vessels," the captain said carefully. "Humans have a tendency to think outside official channels." The communications officer looked up from her station. "Captain, we are receiving tactical updates from the fleet. Admiral Chen sends his regards and asks if you need any additional support." Marcus straightened. "Admiral Chen is my grandfather," he explained to Cather. "He commanded the defense of New Shanghai during the First Contact War. If anyone can handle a Draor invasion, it is him." "First Contact War?" Cathra asked. "Long story," Marcus said. "Let us just say that humanity's introduction to galactic politics was not exactly peaceful." On the main screen, the tactical situation was evolving rapidly. Human ships were moving into position throughout the sector, not to meet the Dracor in direct battle, but to control key strategic points: supply depots, communication relays, navigation beacons. They are not going to fight them head-on. Cather realized, humans rarely fight fair when lives are at stake. Captain Rodriguez confirmed, "We learned a long time ago that the best way to win a war is to make sure the other side cannot fight it properly." As she watched the human fleet deploy, Cather began to understand that she had seriously underestimated these strange aliens. They were not just warriors or explorers. They were strategists on a scale she had never imagined. The Draker invasion force was massive and powerful, but they were about to discover that raw strength meant nothing when your enemy rewrote the rules of engagement. And somehow, Cathara found herself looking forward to seeing what happened next. The war began not with great battles, but with small disasters that struck the Draore fleet, like invisible lightning. Keitha watched from the bridge of the Wanderer as the tactical display updated in real time. The massive invasion force, that had seemed so unstoppable, was beginning to show signs of confusion. Supply convoys went missing. Communication relays stopped responding. Navigation beacons gave false readings that sent ships to empty regions of space. "Phase 1 complete," reported the communications officer. "All Dramor supply lines in the target zone have been severed." Captain Rodriguez nodded. "Casualties minimal on our side. The Dracor are reporting significant losses, but mostly from confusion rather than direct action." Marcus stood beside Cathara, explaining what they were seeing. Human doctrine is simple. Make the enemy fight the war you want to fight, not the war they want to fight. On the screen, a Dramor battle group was circling endlessly, clearly lost without their navigation systems. Another group had stopped entirely, apparently waiting for supply ships that would never come. But they outnumber you 40-1. Cather said eventually they will adapt. Eventually. Yes, Captain Rodriguez agreed. That is why we do not give them time to adapt. As if summoned by her words, the tactical display changed. New signals appeared throughout the Dramor fleet positions. Human ships, dozens of them, materializing out of what had appeared to be empty space. Stealth fields disengaging, the navigation officer reported. All strike teams are in position. Stealth fields? Cathera asked. Human technology, Marcus explained. We bend light and sensor waves around our ships, makes us effectively invisible until we want to be seen. The attack began simultaneously across 12 different locations. But these were not the massive ship-to-ship battles that Cather expected. Instead, small human vessels darted in and out of the Draori formations like hunting insects, targeting specific systems with surgical precision. Command Ship Destroyer in the Alpha Group is reporting total communication failure. The communications officer announced Beta Group Command Vessel is requesting immediate assistance. Multiple ships in Gamma Group are reporting navigation system malfunctions. Captain Rodriguez studied the reports with satisfaction. They are not trying to destroy the ships. They are trying to disable them. Why? Keith asked. Dead ships cannot retreat and warn the rest of the fleet about our capabilities, Marcus explained. Disabled ships can be captured and their crews interrogated. As the hours passed, the pattern became clear. The humans were not fighting a war of conquest or destruction. They were fighting a war of information and control. Every action was designed to gather intelligence while denying it to the enemy. The breakthrough came when a human strike team managed to board and capture a Dramor command vessel. Within minutes, human computer specialists had cracked the ship's databases and downloaded terabytes of strategic information. Captain, the communications officer said, his voice tight with excitement. Admiral Chen is requesting immediate conference. Priority Alpha classification. The main screen changed to show a weathered human face that looked remarkably like an older version of Marcus. Admiral Chen had the same steady eyes, but where Marcus looked confident, the Admiral looked absolutely certain. Captain Rodriguez, he said without preamble, we have a problem. The intelligence we captured from the Drakor command ship changes everything. What did you find, sir? The Dramor are not the real threat. They are being manipulated by a species called the hegemony. Advanced tech, total ruthlessness, and a policy of using other species as weapons against targets they want to soften up before moving in themselves. Captain Rodriguez frowned. You are saying this invasion is just a probe. Worse than that, the hegemony has been orchestrating conflicts throughout this entire sector for the past 50 years. They let other species fight each other, then move in to claim the ruins. The Drakor invasion is just the latest example. Keith felt cold understanding wash over her. The border raids, the increasing aggression. Someone has been pushing the Draori toward this. Exactly, Admiral Chen confirmed. And according to the intelligence we captured, the hegemony fleet is already moving into position to claim this sector once the Dramor have finished destroying the current inhabitants. Marcus stepped forward. What are our orders, sir? Admiral Chen smiled grimly. The hegemony thinks they are clever. They think they can use other species as tools, and then discard them when they are no longer useful. His expression hardened. They have never dealt with humans before. Time to give them an education. The plan that Admiral Chen outlined was ambitious beyond anything Kithra had imagined. The humans would not simply defeat the Dramor invasion. They would turn it around and use it as a weapon against the hegemony itself. Phase 2 begins in 6 hours, Admiral Chen announced. All human vessels will converge on the Dramori flagship. We are going to have a conversation with their emperor. As the connection ended, Cathara turned to Captain Rodriguez. You are going to try to negotiate with them? Not exactly, the captain said. We are going to offer them a choice. The assault on the Drachor flagship was unlike anything in the records of galactic warfare. Instead of trying to destroy the massive vessel, the human fleet surrounded it and simply waited. When the Drakor launched fighters, the human ships used their superior technology to disable them without causing casualties. When the flagship tried to escape, human vessels blocked every route. Finally, Admiral Chen himself led a boarding party directly to the flagship's bridge. The conversation that followed was broadcast throughout both fleets. Cathara listened in fascination, as Admiral Chen calmly explained to the Dracor Emperor exactly how his people had been manipulated by the hegemony. "You think you are expanding your empire," the Admiral said, "but you are just clearing the way for masters who see you as expendable tools." The Emperor's response was predictably aggressive, but Admiral Chen had come prepared. He presented evidence captured from hegemony databases, communication intercepts that showed how the Dramor were being manipulated, and tactical analyses that proved the Emperor's own advisors were working for the enemy. The moment of truth came when Admiral Chen made his offer. "We can destroy your fleet," he said simply. "Our technology is sufficient and our will is certain. But we do not want to. We want you to help us destroy the real enemy." "Why should the Drow Ray trust humans?" the Emperor demanded. Admiral Chen's answer was typically human in its directness. "Because we are the only ones who bothered to tell you the truth." The alliance that followed was born of pragmatism rather than friendship. But it was effective. The Dracor fleet, instead of invading Vani space, turned around and headed for the Hegemony staging areas. When the Hegemony ships arrived expecting to find a sector devastated by Dracor aggression, they instead found a combined fleet of humans and Dracor waiting for them. The battle that followed lasted 3 days and ended with the complete destruction of the Hegemony force. More importantly, it established a new principle in galactic politics. Species that used others as weapons would find themselves facing the combined wrath of their intended victims. Standing on the bridge of the Wanderer as the last Hegemony ship surrendered, Kithra reflected on everything that had changed. Her people were safe, the Dracor had become unlikely allies, and the Hegemony's plans lay in ruins. But more than that, the galaxy had learned something new about humans. They were not just another species seeking territory or resources. They were something unprecedented, a people who would fight not just for themselves, but for the principle that the strong should protect the weak. Marcus appeared beside her as she watched the tactical display. "So, what happens now?" she asked. Now we go home and write up some very interesting reports for the Galactic Council," he smiled. "I have a feeling the next council meeting is going to be a lot more productive than usual." Cathara looked at the human who had fallen from the sky to save her people. "And after that," Marcus's smile widened. "After that, we keep doing what humans do best. We find people who need help, and we help them." As the combined fleet began its journey home, Cather realized that the galaxy had fundamentally changed. The age of the strong preying on the weak was ending, replaced by something new, an age where someone would always be willing to fall from the sky and ask, "Mind if I enter the fight?" And for the first time in her life, Kithra believed that was enough to make all the difference.